Listen closely, because what I am about to tell you could change the way you move through every single conversation you will ever have. Most people believe that when they are questioned, accused, or doubted, they must defend themselves. They believe that if they explain enough, justify enough, apologize enough, the other person will finally understand, and then peace will come. But here is the truth that almost no one realizes. Every time you explain yourself to someone who has already decided, you are not seeking understanding. You are surrendering your power. Think about it. When you rush to justify your decision to someone who does not respect you, what are you actually doing? You are telling them, without saying a word, that their judgment of you matters more than your own. You are making them the judge, the jury, and the executioner of your peace. And the moment you hand them that authority, you will never be free again, because there will always be another demand, another accusation, another reason you must prove yourself worthy. The Stoics understood this trap perfectly, recognizing that silence is not a sign of weakness, but a fortress of internal sovereignty that no outside force can compromise. You are actively bleeding your most valuable cognitive resource on people who have already made the conscious, calculated decision to treat your presence like an absolute option. Watch your daily routine with complete, unvarnished clarity. Notice how much mental capital you expend replaying cold interactions, waiting for text confirmations that never arrive, and trying to manipulate your behavior just to buy back the basic validation of a bankrupt social circle. You tell yourself that your obsession is a form of deep empathy, unmatched loyalty, or profound emotional investment. It is not. It is a severe, deep-rooted crisis of internal security, wearing the clever, deceptive costume of devotion. The master Stoic sees this psychological trap for what it truly is: an exhausting, self-inflicted form of spiritual slavery, where you have willingly handed the remote control of your nervous system to volatile individuals who do not care if your architecture stands or falls. If you continue to force uncritical crowds to acknowledge your worth, you are guaranteeing your own absolute psychological destruction. True dominance does not begin by staging a loud performance to win the temporary applause of the public gallery. It initiates the exact microsecond you cut those invisible strings, pull your self-worth entirely off the public market, and secure the perimeter walls of your own mind. To understand how to maintain an ironclad posture when the people around you fail to value your path, you must look directly at the uncompromising reality of Epictetus. He did not lecture from comfortable university spaces or navigate life with easy shortcuts. He spent his entire youth in actual iron chains as a literal slave before teaching the highest elite of the Roman Empire. His physical master was a brutal, volatile tyrant who eventually snapped Epictetus's leg out of sheer, unprovoked malice. Yet, standing there amidst the raw physical violence of his situation, Epictetus did not break down psychologically. He recognized that while his external body could be bound, chained, and crippled by outside forces, his rational mind remained entirely, absolutely free and sovereign. He birthed the unyielding law of the dichotomy of control, commanding his soul to ruthlessly divide reality into two absolute buckets: the things that rest within your power and the things that do not. The shifting opinions of your peers, the cold behavior of a romantic partner, and the total lack of respect from an arrogant colleague exist entirely outside your borders. They are completely indifferent variables under the control of external forces. Focus 100% of your remaining force strictly on the pristine quality of your immediate labor, leaving the choices of the crowd to the chaotic currents of the universe. The second brutal law requires the immediate implementation of emotional baseline freezing whenever you experience a direct, unexpected social slight or exclusion. When an amateur senses that he is being ignored, sidelined, or undervalued, his heart rate instantly spikes, his tunnel vision narrows, and his mind floods with a frantic, desperate urge to overcompensate, send long text justifications, or pick a loud emotional fight. He is reacting from a primitive place of biological survival panic, which means he is actively validating the other person's baseline superiority and granting them total custody over his mood. A sovereign general handles the exact same data cluster by freezing his emotional response to absolute zero. He looks at the disrespect not as a personal crisis or an emergency that requires immediate defensive navigation, but as completely neutral field data that simply updates his tactical map. He does not waste a single morning unit of focus screaming at his captains or mourning the loss of a shallow, unstable alignment. He calmly logs the new coordinates on his laboratory floor, acknowledges the other person's fundamental ignorance, updates his strategic tracking line, and cleanly moves his attention straight back to his empire. The third law commands the total, permanent destruction of the public declaration trap during your intentional season of emotional detachment. When a fragile individual decides to cut off people who do not value his path, his immediate defensive instinct is to broadcast his new boundaries on the digital square, post cryptic warnings, or announce his sudden unavailability to the crowd. He is using cheap verbal promises to manufacture a counterfeit injection of social validation, trying desperately to see if anyone will notice his absence and chase him down to apologize. This is a catastrophic leak of your creative force. The energy you spend explaining your isolation to spectators is energy you have permanently stolen from your physical execution of deep work. A master Stoic builds his citadel in absolute, suffocating silence. He does not post his boundaries, he does not announce his movements, and he offers zero context to casual observers who notice his sudden drop from the grid. He drops completely behind locked doors, dissolves entirely from the social network, and lets his physical results do every single unit of the talking for him, storing a massive reservoir of internal kinetic tension that drives his machine through the heaviest periods of resistance. The fourth law requires you to practice the cosmic view from above, whenever the acute pain of social isolation threatens to fracture your creative focus. When you are deeply hurt by someone's total lack of respect, it is fundamentally because your primitive ego has artificially inflated that specific interaction until it feels like a catastrophic emergency. You must intentionally neutralize this illusion by shrinking your perspective until your worldly anxieties completely dissolve into the infinite timeline of the cosmos. Imagine leaving your physical frame, floating upward through the ceiling of your quarters, looking down at your city, then the spinning blue marble of the globe, and finally the vast, cold, indifferent expanse of the universe. From that detached vantage point, how significant is the cold shoulder you received this morning? How devastating is the opinion of a temporary traveler whose name will be forgotten by the dust in less than a century? They are less than specks drifting in an empty vacuum. When you realize how fleeting your current struggle is in the grand architecture of time, the desperate need for public judgment completely evaporates, liberating your hands to execute your duty without looking around the room to see who is paying attention. The fifth law commands you to practice the radical protocol of voluntary discomfort through rigorous social fasting. The modern human animal has become completely addicted to constant, frictionless external validation, rendering the spirit fragile, soft, and easily broken by a weekend of total silence. Seneca explicitly commanded his students to set aside a certain number of days every single month to face the raw friction of scarcity, to realize that the mind can survive anything without a dramatic tantrum. In this current era of hyperconnectivity, your specialized gymnasium is total social solitude. Force yourself to step completely away from the digital feeds, go entirely dark on communication platforms, and sit completely still in a solitary room for extended blocks of time with zero access to devices or background audio. Look at the empty wall and let your mind face the raw, unpolished reality of its own thoughts without outside applause to sustain it. By voluntarily entering this psychological friction, you systematically break the addictive power that other people's approval holds over your choices, hardening your attention until focus becomes your non-negotiable default state. The sixth law requires you to adopt the absolute practice of Amor Fati, the unbending love of the resistance itself. When a relationship fractures, when an alliance collapses, or when you are suddenly forced to walk your path in absolute isolation, the default programming of the weak man is to weep and beg fate to change the circumstances. You must invert this matrix with stone-cold finality. You must learn to look at the immense pressure of solitude not as a tragedy, but as the exact mechanical sound of your character being polished into diamond. If your path were always smooth, if everyone clapped for your devotion, your discipline would remain a fragile performance dependent on fair weather. Do not merely tolerate the difficulty of the lonely grind. Learn to welcome it with a fierce, quiet joy. When the isolation hits your chest, look directly at the obstacle and recognize that this precise constraint is the raw industrial material designed to refine your soul. You become the fire that consumes the debris, transforming the pain of being unvalued into a position of total internal dominance. The seventh law requires you to execute the nocturnal review with mathematical objectivity before you close your eyes for sleep. You do not review the timeline of your day to indulge in useless self-pity or self-loathing. You examine your conduct with the pure, unvarnished focus of a clinical auditor checking an engineering pipeline. You trace your hours step by step, identifying exactly where you allowed a toxic interaction to fracture your creative focus, where you gave in to an impulse to check a ghost feed for validation, and where you failed to align your physical actions with your stated principles. You do not waste energy crying over the slip. You calmly note the psychological trigger, update your metrics, clear your slate, and resolve to execute a cleaner line of code tomorrow. If you do not monitor the movements of your own mind with absolute machine-like vigilance, you are effectively leaving the main gates of your citadel wide open for any passing stray to destroy your internal peace. The final law is the absolute acceptance of your own mortality, Memento Mori, using the reality of death as a sharp blade to cut away the unessential variables from your routine. Every single hour you spend overthinking the opinions of people who do not respect your trajectory is a unit of time you have actively thrown directly into the graveyard. We operate our daily schedules as if we have an infinite capital account of days, completely blind to the reality that our time is being drained from us with every single breath we take. Let this awareness determine every single thing you choose to say, think, and execute this evening. You are the sole architect, builder, and inhabitant of your inner fortress. No one is coming to rescue your schedule, fix your finances, or fight your psychological battles for you. You must save yourself by mastering your own internal perceptions and executing your duty in absolute silence right now. Act accordingly. Examine the immense law of architectural threshold. When you set out to build a structure of immense proportion, you do not initiate the project by setting elegant bricks above the surface line. You spend weeks, months, and enormous blocks of physical capital digging deep into the pitch-black subterranean earth, carving a massive cavity into the absolute hardest bedrock layers of granite. To the casual observer walking past the construction site perimeter, it looks as though nothing is being produced. It looks like a massive, empty, unproductive pit of mud and rubble. The spectator laughs because he cannot see the heavy concrete and reinforced iron frames being sunk deep beneath the baseline of the earth. But when the winter storms hit, when the global markets shift, and when the heavy structural pressures of reality lean against the eventual skyscraper, it stands completely immovable because its hidden subterranean foundation matches the exact density of the mountain itself. You must treat your current season of total isolation and zero external views exactly like the subterranean digging phase of your citadel. You are not losing your time. You are burying your roots deep inside the stone where no outside storm can ever reach them. Unpack the profound physical law of kinetic tension accumulation. When an expert archer prepares to launch a high-velocity payload across a massive battlefield distance, he does not simply pick up the arrow and push it forward with a soft, casual movement of his hand. He places the notch against a rigid, unbending wooden frame, locks his stance completely firm into the dirt, and pulls the heavy cord backward with an intense expenditure of physical strain. The farther backward the arrow is dragged, the higher the structural pressure rises across the frame, and the more uncomfortable the mechanical compression becomes within his upper back muscles. The amateur looks at the arrow moving backward away from the target line and foolishly assumes that progress has been completely reversed. He doesn't understand that this precise backward retreat is the mandatory engineering path required to accumulate an explosive, unstoppable store of kinetic energy. The moment the archer opens his fingers and releases his grip, the accumulated tension snaps forward with terrifying velocity, driving the steel tip straight through the thickest armor plating on the horizon. Your current setback is simply the long, silent backward drag of the bowstring. Consider the baseline psychology of the industrial filter. Every single high-value domain across this modern landscape is actively guarded by an automated obstacle matrix designed specifically to weed out the weak, the reactive, and the validation-dependent spectators. If building a multi-million-dollar enterprise or achieving an elite standard of mental strength were a simple matter of reading a few quotes or maintaining a soft daily habit for a weekend, the absolute valuation of that achievement would drop to zero. The resistance you feel when your screen reads 0 impressions or when your progress tracks hit a hard processing wall is not a structural glitch in the matrix. It is the fundamental filter doing exactly what it was engineered to do. It is checking your papers at the gate. It is testing the density of your skull to verify whether you are a real producer who can execute commands in absolute darkness, or simply another fragile consumer looking for a quick payout of cheap ego satisfaction. When you step up to the resistance wall and choose to log the hours regardless of the metrics, you are passing the filter while your competition breaks down and runs away to return to their vices. Master the structural practice of emotional baseline freezing. When an amateur general receives an unexpected field report stating that his frontline columns have been outmaneuvered or his supply reserves have been entirely compromised, his heart rate instantly spikes, his vision narrows, and he floods his tactical headquarters with an absolute wave of frantic commands. He is reacting from a place of biological survival panic, which means his choices are being dictated by his chemical flaws rather than his intellect. A sovereign commander handles the exact same data cluster by freezing his emotional matrix to absolute zero. He looks at the disaster map not as a personal crisis or an insult from fate, but as a completely neutral tactical arrangement that simply requires a clean, calculated modification of his next movement vector. He does not waste an hour screaming at his captains or mourning the loss of his initial blueprint. He calmly logs the new coordinates on his laboratory floor, resets his variables, updates his strategic tracking line, and deploys his remaining armor units with clinical, silent precision. The ultimate destination of your personal growth journey is to achieve a state of total, untouchable environmental independence. Most individuals operate their routines like a basic thermometer, completely reflective of the immediate temperature of the room around them. If the room is warm, if people are throwing accolades at their name, and if the numbers look high, they feel motivated and disciplined. If the room drops into a cold winter chill, if the crowd falls into a heavy silence, and if their initial efforts return zero visible metrics, their focus instantly collapses into stagnation. They are completely dependent on the weather. You must learn to look at your mind as an industrial thermostat. You do not reflect the temperature of your environment. You dictate it by the internal settings of your own non-negotiable principles. Let the public arena drop into absolute zero. Let the critics turn their cold backs on your empire, and let fate deal its most chaotic hand. Deep inside the silent, dark void of your own mind, your engine must continue to run at peak velocity simply because your internal layout refuses to accept a second of mediocrity from your hands. To truly conquer the agonizing loop of rejection and social dismissal, you must grasp the concept of the uncarved block, the ancient state of raw potential that refused to be shaped by outside tracking metrics. When you are constant trying to mold your choices to satisfy the expectations of someone else, you are carving away pieces of your unique character to fit inside a layout designed by mediocre people. You become a small, weak imitation of yourself. The master remains completely uncarved, rough, heavy, and completely distinct from the crowd. He does not smooth down his sharp corners to make the public feel comfortable around his desk. He forces the external landscape to accept his raw texture exactly as it stands on the baseline floor. If the crowd values his labor, he remains completely indifferent. If the crowd rejects his presence, his stability registers zero change. He is self-contained. He is complete within his own boundaries. When you achieve this unyielding architecture, you stop chasing travelers who are destined to fade out of your orbit, and you naturally become an immovable target around which the universe must align. Analyze the deep internal rot that occurs when you let nostalgia dictate how you treat an association that has already run dry. When a connection begins to fade or turn toxic, your brain automatically plays an idealized memory reel of the early days, focusing exclusively on the initial warmth and completely hiding the pattern of exploitation right in front of your face. You are falling in love with a ghost. You are dedicating your finest morning energy to a fantasy that has zero structural components in real time. A sovereign man cuts the line with absolute engineering finality. He does not wait for a dramatic argument or a formal explanation to close the folder. He simply raises his perimeter walls, drops his active participation metrics to zero, and steps entirely into the silent trenches of his own high-value labor. Let them wonder where you went. Let them invent stories to explain your cold absence, and let them comfort each other in their collective mediocrity. Your only contract is with your highest potential, and that contract requires your undivided focus. Consider the immense mechanical clarity that flows directly into your routine when you permanently erase the word hope from your operational vocabulary. Hope is a fragile, unstable emotional currency used exclusively by the helpless to postpone their execution. The man who operates on hope is constantly begging external variables to align in his favor, making his internal peace entirely dependent on luck, weather, and the unpredictable choices of strangers. A Stoic citadel is not built on hope. It is built on cold, calculating strategic design. You do not hope the day will be easy. You prepare your machinery to process absolute chaos without leaving your posture. You do not hope that people will treat your devotion with respect. You assume their complete ignorance and insulate your boundaries against their capacity to leak poison into your system. When you strip away the emotional padding of hope and replace it with raw clinical expectation, your mind achieves a state of pristine stillness. You stop checking the horizon for a savior and start focusing 100% of his remaining focus on the mechanical precision of your immediate input. Unpack the profound behavioral science underlying what Marcus Aurelius defined as the ruling faculty of the mind, the absolute internal filter that dictates your entire reality. The external world possesses zero direct channels to your nervous system. A public slight, a cold text message, or a sudden betrayal does not have an electrical signal that can enter your brain and force you to experience anger or paralysis. Every single input from the arena must first cross the border of your perception, where your internal narrative assigns it a specific meaning. If you choose to label the setback as an absolute tragedy that has ruined your plans, you are actively manufacturing the poison that destroys your execution. The Master General looks at the exact same data point and strips it of all emotional metrics, treating it as completely objective topography to be integrated into his battlefield maneuvers. The obstacle is not a malicious entity designed to ruin your life. It is simply a raw, natural feature of the environment that requires a tactical shift. Master this internal translation layer, and you turn the heaviest blows of fate into specialized engineering assets for your empire. We must now address the terminal phase of your reconstruction protocol, which requires the absolute, permanent destruction of your dependency on modern digital validation tracking. The modern technological grid is custom-built to turn your mind into a hyper-reactive, praise-dependent machine that can no longer execute long-term strategic plans without a constant stream of external applause. You post your milestones to hear notifications ring. You alter your language to fit the consensus of the public gallery. And you measure the value of your daily labor by whether or not an indifferent crowd chooses to click a validation icon on their glass screens. You are living your life as an absolute slave. Break this digital umbilical cord with stone-cold finality. Your character, your integrity, and the structural density of your inner fortress cannot be validated or broken by the chaotic opinions of a bankrupt public square. Pull your self-worth entirely off the public market. Lock your terminal screens down to the single metrics that drive your production, and execute your daily duty simply because your own internal standards refuse to tolerate mediocrity. Stand alone, think alone, build alone, and let the quiet majesty of your physical results become the only testament to your absolute dominance across this arena. This philosophy demands everything from your character. It demands that you stop being a passive victim of your immediate circumstances and start taking absolute, unyielding ownership of your own mind. You are the sole architect, the single guardian, and the final inhabitant of your inner citadel. No one is coming to save you from your anxieties, fight your battles, or organize your daily schedule. You must save yourself by mastering your own perceptions and enforcing machine-like immigration parameters at the borders of your focus. Let the external world rage, let the opinions of the crowd shift like the autumn wind, and let fate deal its most chaotic hand onto your laboratory desk. Deep inside the dark void of your own consciousness, remain steady, unbothered, fiercely productively, and entirely free. Step back into your arena tomorrow morning with absolute clarity. Close your gates to the public gallery, pick up your tools, and log the silent hours required to turn your potential into pure diamond. Act accordingly.